Hi everyone and welcome back to my booktube channel, Lisa in Bookland. This is my November reading wrap up. So thankfully there was a big increase in my reading in November, which is lovely, mainly because I went on holidays and I did vlog that holiday. I'll link it down below. So that's when I did a lot of my reading. So I already talked about a good few of those books in more detail in that video, so I won't go into them in too much depth in this video in case you have seen that one already. But I also did pick up a few others. So yes, in the usual order, for anybody that didn't see, I went to the Peak District and Yorkshire for my holidays, and I started off the Peak District going to attempt to visit Chatsworth House. Of course I had to read Pride and Prejudice, and yes, I listened to this on audiobook, the audiobook that everybody always mentions, and it was absolutely wonderful as usual. It's my 67th reread of Pride and Prejudice, and yeah, it's just such a good book. I really enjoyed it. I don't really know what else to say about Pride and Prejudice that I haven't said about it before. I think the ranking that was in my head, I can't even remember if I've done a ranking in this channel. In the ranking I have in my head, it is second. I think it maybe used to be behind Emma, but now I think I prefer it than Emma. It's hard to know, but yeah, no, I think at the moment I prefer it than Emma. Persuasion, of course, will always be first. I love Persuasion. Just an utter delight to listen to it, and especially the audiobook. The one thing audiobook I haven't listened to that I also would like to as well, and I think I actually own it. Audible did this collection, this full Jane Austen collection, and I haven't listened to that yet, and I think that has some like more cast, which I'd love to listen to that as well. And before I went, I did watch the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, which yeah, I just really enjoy. So it was wonderful to read that in the course of my holiday. So then sticking with the Regency, maybe on some non-fiction, so somebody that Jane Austen would have been familiar with, and that's Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire. This had been on my TBR for a year or so, and it's a character that I suppose crops up here and there and I'd heard of and knew a little bit about, but she's the woman that the Duchess, that film was based on. So yeah, I just wanted to read this book, I suppose, and it was such an interesting and enjoyable biography. I don't read a lot of biographies, but whenever I do, I just enjoy them so much. She was born Georgiana Spencer, so from a wealthy family in her own right. Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, or Georgiana Cavendish as was her married name, also had a very interesting but sometimes very difficult life as well. She was married very early, like many women of her time were, to the Duke of Devonshire, who was a good bit older than her. They weren't very well suited. I suppose she was being quite young and affectionate, and he was a bit more like distant, but probably not the worst marriage that the world has ever seen. They both had affairs. They had an awful job trying to conceive an heir. They had 2 daughters first before the son was born. Probably the most interesting thing for a modern reader about this book was Georgiana's massive gambling addiction and the ways she tried to hide it and cover it and borrow money, and the way she'd be kind of hide it from the Duke, like do anything to conceal the truth. And yeah, eventually when she had to tell him and the repercussions of that, and I just thought it was really scintillating reading and just really like relevant to people that have gambling issues today, I suppose. She also is very involved in politics, so it's kind of interesting the way she managed to carve out that role for herself when women couldn't have, like, I suppose, an official role. So it was really interesting, like the great advice she was able to give to people. And I suppose she was one of those like society hostesses that like Cavendish House in London would be like a basis for like all the Whig Party members coming to like have conversations on how she campaign in elections and things. So yeah, just a really interesting book. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, of course, being interested in the Georgian period, it was just nice to get like an overview, but yeah, fascinating woman. So onto historical fiction for the Regency. This is a book I picked up in Madrid of all places, and it is called Jane Aiken Hodge, The Winding Stair. This historical fiction that's set in Spain in the Napoleonic Wars. This girl called Joanna has kind of grown up with her English relatives in England, but and it's it had a great opener actually. It's the very start. She's standing on this bridge and she's thinking about jumping into the river when this guy comes up and convinces her not to do it, and she's like 14 or something, and her cousins like always make fun of her because she has a stutter, and the only time she doesn't stutter is when she sings. So yeah, she's just miserable. Eventually, through various circumstances, she ends up being sent to Spain to live with her relatives over there, and yeah, she ends up becoming involved in this like kind of a conspiracy group called the Sons of the Star, something like that. Her grandmother acts as kind of a gatekeeper for them, and she wants to have Joanna as like an apprentice. It's very like melodramatic at some points. There's a lot of going down dark stairs with candles, and she's stuck between several men, and yeah, like attempted murders, all that kind of thing. Yeah, no, it was grand. I quite enjoyed it, but you know, it just dragged on a little bit long for me potentially, even though it's only 300 pages long. That's just when you know it's dragging on a bit. But yeah, like it's very 70s, I suppose. When was it published? Like, as you can tell from the cover, the male lead's name is called Gerry O'Brien. I don't even watch Coronation Street, but there is a character that's called like Ken Barlow. It's just kind of a funny one. Yeah, it was first published in 1968. So I enjoyed reading something that was set in the Regency that wasn't set in England or Ireland, but yeah, just a bit of a melodrama. So following that with a reread, and that was my reread of Patrick O'Brien, Desolation Island, which is the fifth novel in the Aubrey-Maturin series. I absolutely loved this. It has all the classic elements of an Aubrey-Maturin novel. At the start, Jack is like, oh, this man came and like told me that there's great like potential for like mining on my land, so I gave him loads of money, and now he's going to get me a return, and everybody's like, oh no, this is going to go terribly wrong. It doesn't really come to fruition in this book, but it's so like, it's not a spoiler because it's so obvious it's going to go wrong because it's Jack. After a while, he does eventually get on a ship. He gets given command of the Leopard, which I think he's, you know, when you've read all the books, they all kind of mix together in your heads in a series, because there's no like, there isn't really many like self-contained plots in them after like the first 2 or 3. But yes, I think he had command of the Leopard before, but it's been converted for use as a prisoner ship to transport convicts to Australia, which was interesting to have. I would have like, I suppose Patrick O'Brien's writing is beautiful, and I'm always really glad to spend loads of time with Jack and Stephen. There was like a storyline involving like kind of two of like one of the main convicts and a crew member on the ship, but like I would have like maybe liked more information about the rest of the convicts, not just like one high class convict they kind of focused on. But yeah, there's only so much can we do. I just really enjoyed this. It was just, I just love Patrick O'Brien. It's very like slow, very ponderous. You get there eventually. You definitely benefit by having a map beside you, but yeah, he's just really enjoyable. So yes, onto the Victorian era, another classic, another reread, North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I just at that time I was really busy, I rewatched the series one Saturday, and I just absolutely loved the series, so then naturally I wanted to return to the book. This is like one of my favourite classics of all time, one of my favourite books of all time. I have passages and passages of it underlined, and yeah, I just love the story, I love the characters, like, oh, just everything about it. Mr. Thornton, I think I know I would rank Mr. Thornton above all of Jane Austen's heroes. So yeah, sorry Jane Austen, but like Jane Austen, better overall stories and writing. Heroes, definitely. John Thornton, I just have a real soft spot for him, and his mother as well. I just love the Thorntons. I suppose just like, who doesn't love reading about like, I suppose the like self-made man. But yes, and Margaret always has a lovely storyline, just such like, oh, the romance of this is just fabulous, of course. And yeah, I just love the Higginses, everything. Like, I mean, yeah, North and South is absolutely fabulous. If you haven't read it yet, I would definitely recommend. Although I sadly didn't get to any Brontë books on my holiday or in the rest of the month. The Brontë bit was kind of add-on afterwards, that wasn't really planned. I did manage to pick up this, which I bought in Haworth, and I read The Vanished Bride by Bella Ellis. This is the first in a series in which the Brontë sisters act like solve murders. In this one, a governess has been murdered, and yeah, the Brontë sisters investigate, and that's about it. I really enjoyed it. The Brontë sisters, as far as I know about them, felt true to character to me. There was lots of kind of interesting little side characters that came in. The mystery was compelling in itself, and the writing was good. So like, I mean, it was an all-round win, a very easy little read, and I very much enjoyed it. And so all we've left then is the more modern books. I did actually read a surprising number of these, like 3, which is a good bit for me. So the first one I read on my holidays as well was A Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein. This is shortlisted for the Man Booker. So I wanted to read it when I was over there. The premise of this book, I didn't read a lot. I actually ended up reading 3 of the Man Bookers in the end, one of which I'll talk about in a second. But this one really appealed to me because of the blurb. It's about this young woman who moves from a city to a rural area where her family was originally from. Her brother has moved back there, and his wife and children have just left him, and so she moves in with him as a housekeeper essentially, and things start to go wrong. A dog is kind of like a phantom pregnancy, or a sheep loses a lamb. The townsfolk become a bit suspicious of her. She doesn't speak the language, so they're a bit on edge with each other all the time. It's very, like, it is it was just, nothing much happened in this novel. There was a lot going on under the surface, probably half of which I didn't even get. There is an undercurrent that she is a Jew, and and the other people in the area are a little bit hostile because of that. Again, nothing overt, it's just kind of implied or like mentioned in passing. So I think it was a lovely short little book, so it's definitely something I think I would go back to. If it was in the past, you'd kind of think it was like leading up to a witch trial or something. If anybody's read Elizabeth Gaskell's Lois the Witch, that same kind of feeling. It didn't, I think it's fair to say. Like, it is it's set in modern times and nobody ends up getting drowned in the end or anything, but yeah, it's just that a disturbing little book, but it was quite good. I'm glad that the one that won the Booker did win the Booker, which I suppose I should talk about now. So I also did read, because it was from my book club, I read Profet Song by Paul Lynch, who is of course an Irish author, and I'm so delighted obviously for him that he won the Booker, but especially because I read the book before it was announced. I haven't read the other Irish books. It was on the shortlist. The Bee Sting, maybe I'll get to that, maybe not. It's not like a priority for me, but maybe I'll get to it at some stage. But yeah, Profet Song, I listened to an audiobook. It's set in like contemporary Ireland, or like maybe very slightly in the future. The main character, her husband is a school teacher, and he's very involved in like teachers' unions. He's like one of the main roles in the union. And at the start, 2 men, 2 people from the Gardaí, the police force in Ireland, come to his house looking to talk to him about something, and there's the idea that it's about his union activities. There's this political party that's slowly coming to power and gaining more and more influence in the country, and how that affects a normal woman's life. People are being arrested and they're never heard from again. Some organisations have to shut down, protests are being stopped, and it was really disturbing to read. And I suppose the most shocking thing is, like, there is things like this happening in the world, but because when it's set in your own home country, it's just way more impactful. So yeah, really opened my eyes that way. It was just, it is quite a despairing novel, and not for the faint of heart, but it was an excellent book and I'd really recommend it. I did like wonder when I was reading it, like at being nominated for the Booker, I'm like, will this be as relatable to people that aren't from Ireland? Like, will they understand it? But the acclaim it seems to have got is like international. I haven't heard that as a criticism at all. And the ending scene, I don't want to spoil anything, but the ending scene definitely was a good punch. People at the book club compared it to The Handmaid's Tale, and that could, at the start when the bank accounts are shut down and things, but it reminded me a lot really of the rise of the Nazi party to power in Germany. I didn't mention, and that I would have liked to have had in the book,
was a more broader idea of the world, and kind of, I suppose, more of a resolution. I just wanted to know more about the politics and kind of what was happening. But I will say that in my book club I was in the minority in that. It is very much like, I suppose it's just such an intriguing setup and kind of an alternative reality type of thing, but it is very much the story of this woman and her family and how they're dealing with this world. So yeah, just maybe not to expect too much the other way. Like, it was still a really good book, but yeah, I suppose I just wanted even more. And yeah, it could have made a really good dystopian novel as well as just a just as well as a novel about the person.
Really, really good book, and I'm very glad it won, and congratulations to Paul Lynch. So the final book I'm going to talk about then is Worn: A People's History of Clothing by Sofi Thanhauser. I absolutely adored this book. I'm really interested in fabric, and I am a lot more conscious now of when I'm buying clothes what fabric it's made of and who's made the clothes and where the fabric comes from. So yeah, I won't go into it too much again, but like basically there's 5 sections in this that talks about different types of fabric: linen, cotton, silk, synthetics and wool, both the history of kind of how they were produced and how they're produced today, and the impact. Obviously we all know fast fashion is bad in terms of, I suppose when you think of fast fashion you think of the factory workers actually assembling the garments. But what's really important as well is how the fabric is made and sourced. Just cotton, and that one was absolutely shocking. Like, we all know that you should buy organic cotton, sometimes it takes that bit of extra effort to source it, I suppose, and it is a bit more expensive, but it's something we should all do. But even with that, just like the story of how like landscapes have been absolutely changed forever by diverting water to different areas, or like the silk was really sad as well. You know how traditional silk is going to be practically unattainable in the future because there's no more space left for mulberry trees to grow. So it was pretty depressing reading, I have to say, for a lot of this book, but a really impactful book, and just again underlines how much we need to think about every single purchase and whether we can reuse something that we already have. Can we get it second hand? Anything that helps out. Like, we could only do what we can do ourselves, I suppose. But yeah, just it's definitely one of my books of the year, as I said in my vlog. Yeah, that was my November reading wrap up. Let me know if you've read any of these books, and yeah, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday for my next video.